Chargers. Touchdown, UCLA.
With USC great and NFL stud, Frosty Rucker.
The Trojans back in front.
And LAFB founder Ryan Dyrud on the Believe Podcast Network and LAFBnetwork.com. This is your destination for Los Angeles football.
What's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome in to another episode of the LA Football Show right here on the LA Football Network, our city, our network. We are everywhere you get your podcasts, on YouTube at LAFB Network. And of course, on the website, you can get all of our shows, all of our articles, everything you need regarding LA football can be found right at LAFBnetwork.com. I'm your co-host, Ryan Dyrud, joined by our newest full-time co-host, the madman, Jamal Madni. What's up, my brother? How you doing?
What's happening, Ride or Die? Excited to kick off episode number 2 here with you.
Episode 2 with these two guys on the mic. Could not be more thrilled. Hope the Monday has treated you well. It's a brand new week. Always try to start the week off right, and it's always good to start the week off with you, my friend. So thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. What a delight. Monday night, baby.
Monday night. So we got a fun show for today, though. It's the off season. We are I don't know if we're in the dog days of the off season yet. I think June is when that really hits, just because we're still a few weeks removed to the drafts. There's still some topics to talk about there. The schedule just came out, 4 days ago. So at least we had that to talk about. So we still got a little bit, but coming June, we're in the dog days. We're not quite there, but we're on a slower news cycle now, Jamal, but we have some fun things we're going to talk about. We got Jordan Addison, who is the former Biletnikoff winner last year out of Pittsburgh, who's in the transfer portal, has his narrowed down choices to, we'll just say 3 schools, but one of the SoCal schools is one of those. We're going to talk about that. There is new legislation potentially in California regarding NIL that you brought to my attention. I didn't even realize. So we're going to talk about that for all you sports law buffs or just people that are tuned into college football. And then we're going to talk about Rams, Chargers, and what a true rivalry can look like and how it comes to be. Because, Jamal, we have so many great teams in LA, and almost I think every major sport here has multiple teams, and yet there's not that true rivalry. So how can that come to be with our Rams and Chargers? So we'll get into that. Before we go, and I already feel like I'm talking too much without having you jump in, but I'll just get this out of the way now. BetOnline, sponsor of the show. Make sure to head to betonline.ag on mobile or desktop. Use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. And you're going to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. You put in $25, you get, I'm terrible at math. What is that? 12.5. I should use a better number. You put in $50, you get $25 free when you use that promo code BELIEVE. We got the NHL playoffs, NBA playoffs, Major League Baseball going. You can bet on futures like the NFL if you want to pick your Super Bowl favorite. Right now, the Rams, I believe, are about plus, what we look last time, Jamal, like 1,200. I think they're 4th.
Yep,
around
exactly.
There. Plus 1,200 on BetOnline. If you want to bet on them, the Chargers are not far behind them. I think plus 1,800, I believe. They're in the top 10 still. I think they're top 6 in Super Bowl favorites. So head to BetOnline. I got to say before we move on, though, Jamal, when we promoted this last episode, you had some good NBA predictions that didn't really pan out.
Oh boy. I mean, my Bucks Suns rematch. You want to talk about crashing and burning in my face? Holy cow. I've had friends calling me all day, basically telling me, because, folks realize that I like to let people know when I'm right. And so other people like to let me know when I'm wrong. And boy, oh boy, what did that blow up in my face? I will say, not having Chris Middleton with the Bucks really hurt. I think that if Middleton plays, I still think the Bucks would have been the best team in the East. But the Suns Mavs to me is the one that's inexplicable. What happened to the Phoenix Suns? And and Pat Beverly coming out and just crushing Chris Paul, I think unfairly today with a lot of the ESPN shows. But my God, what happened to the Phoenix Suns? And you can't help but think this might be the end of their window.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do, but it's all good, Jamal. That's why we promote BetOnline. We don't promote our picks. We don't say put your money on what we say. We say these are our opinions. but do what you want. BetOnline.ag, like I said, Believe, BLEAV is your promo code to enter there. So, Jamal, let's get into this Jordan Addison talk. First of all, I got to ask you, not really ask you, but I guess just kind of toss to you. Everyone kind of forgets this kid won the Biletnikoff because going into, not just the fact that we had the draft and you had 5-star receivers in that first round with Drake London, our USC guy, obviously the 2 Ohio State kids, you had Traylon Burks, you had the Alabama kid, all these different amazing receivers. Jordan Addison was the best in terms of NCAA collegiate year in 2021 by winning the Biletnikoff. Just talk to the people that don't know, like, how good is this kid?
Ryan, he's just a smooth receiver, 6'3", 198, absolutely tore up the ACC and really helped propel Kenny Pickett to the type of season that he had and ultimately ended up going 20th in the first round to the Steelers. He reminds me a lot of a slightly smaller Amari Cooper. The role that Cooper played at Alabama and the way Addison played at Pittsburgh, very similar, and they did very similar things relative to the offense. The guy is a very smooth route runner. He's very good in terms of post routes, inside curls, and out routes in particular. Pickett has just sort of laid the ball out to him, really soft hands. And he's a difference maker. Now, does he do anything physically that jumps off the page potentially at the next level? Probably not. Hands, speed, size, catch radius. Nothing I would say is A+ exceptional, but he's a guy that does everything very well. And that's what has made him so special at the collegiate level. And I expect him to have another bang up year, depending on who his quarterback's going to be moving forward.
There's a guy here in LA that kind of just does everything well and does it better than everyone else, and that's Cooper Kupp. So, doesn't necessarily jump off the page in terms of measurables and that. So, I think the fact that Jordan Addison can do everything in the wheelhouse well. And before I talk about his prospects and future, got to say, if Drake London stays healthy, he's winning the Biletnikoff, though. I have no doubt in my mind Drake London wins that award last year, right?
Ryan, there's an argument to be made that Drake London should have won the Biletnikoff having played only 8 games. Okay, he was that dominant. With Addison, it was more the aggregate, right? When you add up all of the stats over a 13-14 game period, when you put all the moments together, you put the whole body of work together, you say, okay, receptions, yards, touchdowns, he sort of cumulatively had the most. When you look at dominance and when you look at per game averages, Drake London was by far and away the best receiver in college football last year. And if that's the metric that you wanted to go off of in terms of performance intensity, in terms of both statistical and impact-wise, there is no argument for anybody else outside of Drake London. And it actually would have been extremely compelling to see him win the Biletnikoff playing only 8 games.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And, you brought up you like to inform your friends and colleagues when you are right. And I will be not the first, but I will stay here again that I was without a doubt saying Drake London would be the first receiver taken. There was no doubt in my mind. So I will sit here vindicated knowing that he was taken 8th overall by the Falcons, the first receiver. I had no doubt. There was kudos to Olave, to all the great other receivers in the Garrett Wilson, all these other great receivers. And Wilson was taken just 2 picks later at 10. But there was no doubt in my mind. Drake London was the best receiver, is the best receiver, and I think will have the best rookie season as well.
Ryan,
you agree with that?
Is that when you think about legends, and legends are sort of defined by some incredible moments. And if you kind of look at, there was one legendary moment with an LA icon, Kobe Bryant. He's been littered with them. But there was one in particular in the 2005 season when the Lakers played the Mavericks. Shot clock running low. He's in the left corner. He shoots a 3-pointer one-handed with the left, and it goes in. And on the way down, Mark Cuban got up and gave him a standing ovation. And similarly, not the 2021 game, but the 2020 USC UCLA game, when Drake London scored on a 76-yard touchdown, breaking 5 UCLA secondary tackles in dragging two guys with him to the end zone, and Chip Kelly, under his playbook, applauded while that happened. That's all you need to know about how special this kid is and can be.
Yeah, that's a great point. What a great comparison right there. Great LA comparison, and it's so true. But all right, well, let's get back to Addison in the transfer portal. So if those haven't caught us rambling on that, he's not returning to Pittsburgh, most likely, unless something crazy happens. He will be attending a different school. It was down last week, Jamal, to 3 schools, which we plan on talking about last episode. We just ran out of time, but it was down to Alabama, Texas, and SC. And now you think, and I'm not just saying you think, I mean, there may be reports out there, but I'll throw it to you that it's down more to 2 now. And I would love to hear your talk on that. And we can go kind of back and forth on why that is, but then also how he fits potentially with SC.
Yeah, Ryan, it's starting to get a sense. Obviously, lots of different media reports out there nationally as well as locally that it feels like it's a 2-horse race between Texas and USC. And he just visited Texas, saw the incredible facilities, and ironically enough, being wined and dined by Steve Sarkisian, former USC Trojans. So in many ways,
do you think he was wined? Do you think he was wined? Was there alcohol there, you think?
Too soon, Ryan. Hashtag too soon, But, he's out there, and there was actually reports that a lot of the Texas boosters and power brokers from behind the scenes were really hoping that they could close the deal and not have Addison visit USC. But Addison looks like he's going to be visiting SC at some point later this week, more likely into the weekend. And I think it's going to be a 2-horse race. And I think what's being driven by it, truthfully, Ryan, is the lucrative amount that potentially is out there. The numbers out there are around $3 million that he could potentially be offered for this year, which would be a staggering amount. There was reports that sort of a lower tier SEC team gave him an offer around kind of the mid, $500,000, $600K, kind of mid 6-figure range. And, the guy didn't even sort of blush at it. So he's looking for that kind of multi-year, multi-million type of situation here. I should say 1-year, multi-million-dollar situation there. And it feels like the deepest pockets right now for that seem to be Texas and USC.
Oh, man. It's just crazy where we are in college football, just 2 years, like when this NIL opportunity, whatever you want to call it, began, and the Wild West that we're in now from where it was just 2 years ago when this was highly illegal within NCAA standards. And now just being able to talk about a player getting offered essentially $500,000 and he might get offered $3 million, which is crazy. And we can go down a rabbit hole and talk if that's good for the sport or not, which I'm sure we'll actually get into when we talk about some of this legislation topic with California. But to me, Jamal, and then I'll toss it back to you, I don't see how he goes to Texas over USC unless he truly only cares about the money. And I'm not saying that's bad. Like, hey, to each their own. Maybe, you want to get as much money as you can to begin with to support your family. I mean, I think there's no reason this kid won't go to the NFL, but like you said, with yes, he was a Biletnikoff winner, but with his skill set, who knows? Maybe he is a Cooper Kupp like 3rd round pick that doesn't get that bag right off the bat unless he performs well in the NFL in his first rookie contract. So maybe he's thinking, hey, I should just get as much. I'm on the highest of highs right now in college with the Biletnikoff. I'm getting offered this. But unless Texas offers an ungodly amount of money, I don't know how you choose Texas over SC just from where the programs are right now. And I know Texas both programs had a terrible season last year, but Texas is in the same exact position they were last year, whereas USC has totally 180'd, bringing in Lincoln Riley. You have all these recruits. You have Mario Williams. You have Caleb Williams. You have just the city backing you once again. So to me, if you want to make money, because it's not like he's not going to make money come to SC. If you want to make money and you want to do more for your football, SC is a no-brainer. Texas, though, if he's just getting offered a ton of money, then we can say, you know what? Kudos to you. No problem. Some people will have problems. I don't have a problem with it. Good for you. Feed your family. Make the bag right now. I just don't see how you don't choose SC unless it's about the money. Your thoughts?
Ryan, I think it's an excellent point and spot on as always. I think though that this situation and the pros and cons here, I think have a lot more to do on the financial side than the on the field side. Because even if you look at where he's leaving from, from Pitt's perspective, this was a team that was in a New Year's Six game. This is a team that is replacing Kenny Pickett with Keaton Slovis, former USC quarterback.
Yeah.
Okay, and Slovis, before he got hurt and sort of went out of favor with Trojan Nation, was a very productive player, a great pure thrower of the ball. When you factor kind of the incumbency effect of what Pitt has going over the last year, the momentum that they've gained, the ACC is still shaky at best. We don't really know if Clemson's going to quite have the bounce back year and be the Clemson that we think they will be. There's really an opportunity to win where he is. And so the fact of the matter is that this is a financial situation. This is a financial decision. And I think he's weighing not only the potential bag that he can get, but what comes with that, the alumni network, the opportunity to kind of set himself up for the future. And I think one piece that unfortunately is very much in Texas's favor is the lack of state income tax. And so if I give you $3 million, if I'm UT, and I give you $3 million at USC, the $3 million goes further in Texas than it does in California from a purchasing power standpoint. And B, I just have more that I retain because I'm not giving away that much in taxes. So for me, SC is actually going to have to sweeten it a little bit more and really sell him on Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley, assuring him of being a higher pick. And I think that has to be the sell with Addison, including the money. Because if it's just a money thing, pure money thing, I'm afraid Texas actually has the advantage.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm curious. I'm not talking in I know instance, but I'm curious if there's, cause I do know that other businesses that work online have done this, and obviously he's not working online, but I'm curious if there's a opportunity or obviously whether or not it's legal, if players can set up LLCs in different states and basically take payment from California schools to their LLC in a different state and not pay that California income tax. I have no idea if that's the legality behind that or whatnot. Our business is LLC'd in California. We are a LA based company. But I just wonder if that's even an opportunity that people have looked into. I'm sure they have, because that'd be really interesting that they can work around that, if you will. And maybe SC with their network and their business acumen can say, maybe set up your LLC in Vegas but come play for us and we'll just pay your Vegas LLC.
No, that's a great point, Ryan. And I'm sure that there's a lot being worked on that. I think that in terms of sort of the product or services that you're creating and getting paid for, the fact that he is doing that primarily in a Texas or a California, I think there's some protection there. But again, this is this wild world of nil that we have to sort of be thinking about this as not just analysts and fans, but as coaches, as ADs, as boosters. Welcome to the new world of college football.
Yeah, because I just know, and last thing, and then I want to get on to his fit with SC on the football field. But when I went so I moved from Colorado, as you know, but for those that don't know, if you listen to the show, you definitely know because I talk about it all the time. But I went from Colorado to California to go to school, to go to Long Beach State. And before I was a resident, which it takes a lot to become a resident, right? You have to, get your ID, you have to go to the DMV, you have to show a residency bill with your name in it, all these different things. So for the first 3 or 4 years I was in college, I was still a Colorado resident under my parents' home. And so there's that thought process that, well, wherever Jordan Addison is from, parents are from, why couldn't he be accepting payment to his parents' home? Now, the issue becomes if he were to ever move to California and become a resident, he would pay back taxes on that pay, because that happened to me. I all of a sudden became a resident in California 4 years later, and the DMV, this was my own, well, I was too honest. I'll just say I have a lot of integrity. I like to pretend I do anyway. And I told them that I had lived here for 4 years. I just wasn't ready yet. And they said, well, your car was registered in Colorado. You got to pay 3 years of back taxes because you've been living here. I'm like, well, I was already paying taxes in Colorado. They're like, well, you were living here. So that's where the interesting conversation would be. But if he never puts up residency or whatnot, I don't know. It's a crazy. That's out of my thought process that I can really wrap my head around.
And then we'll go to the football side of things. Is that we're, based on what you're describing, we're getting perilously close to Reggie Bush territory, right? And basically the thing that Reggie
Yes.
was exiled for, and to a certain degree is still exiled from the football program because his number 5 isn't in the Coliseum hanging from the stadium rafters as it should be.
Yeah.
But this is kind of that Reggie Bush situation. And it sort of reminds me that this is not just with Reggie, but this is far from an unprecedented situation with SC. I remember the old show in the early 2000s, the Best Damn Sports Show. I don't know if you remember that one on Fox.
Oh, yeah. Period.
Was one of the hosts. And Rodney Peete would joke all the time that he would take, when he left SC to go to the pros, he actually had to have a pay cut. And most guys actually had a pay cut when they left SC to go to the pros. So, SC's had a long lineage in this, both in front of the veil and behind the veil. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
I won't put anyone on blast or say names, but I've had multiple players say that when they left SC and got drafted, their teammates made fun of them saying like, oh, you're taking a pay cut now in the NFL. Like it was just, that was known, at least around NFL football circles. And that's probably been known a lot with SEC schools and whatnot. So, but anyway, moving on from that, Jamal, just quickly, I guess, and then we'll move on to the legislation portion, but how does Addison fit with this offense? Because you bring over Mario Williams, you bring over Brendan Rice, you have, I personally think Kyle Ford is going to have a breakout year. No one's talking about Kyle Ford. I think just the big body and what he is and how much tread he has, because he hasn't really played much, being a red shirt and then having some injury history. But you have Taj Washington. You have these really good receivers. How would Addison fit in the fold?
I think that he actually, Ryan, I think there's actually still a little bit of a void in SC's receiving room. And I think that Mario Williams is kind of your home run guy, and he's the one that's going to sort of stretch the field. And then, as you mentioned very astutely, I think Kyle Ford is going to play that sort of pseudo Drake London, Kyle Pitts type of role for SC in terms of getting the tough yards, but also being able to sort of break free. But that intermediate passing game that really kind of keeps the chains moving and keeps you on schedule and keeps that rhythm, there's still a void there in SC's receiving room. I think Brendan Rice has a lot of potential, and I think he's shown flashes at Colorado. We haven't seen it, sort of put all together. I think Taj Washington, to be honest with you, may be the odd man out because I think his lunch is going to get eaten by Mario Williams, and they do kind of similar things, and Mario is just sort of flat out better. But I think that intermediate passing game, that complement to sort of the home run as well as kind of the thumper in the passing game, is really where Addison can step in and button up all the holes in that passing game and really make SC very invincible on offense when you sort of couple that with what they have in the backfield with Travis Dye and Austin Jones. I think it's actually a pretty significant piece to the puzzle.
Yeah, I mean, he could be, if people want to just reference past players, he could be kind of the Amon-Ra St. Brown of the receiving core in a sense that he can kind of do it all, can be your home run hitter if you need to, but that's not his role. His role is that intermediate, move the chains, be a guy that can play in the slot, play on the outside, kind of play all over the place. And that's another reference of it where he could go in the draft. Who knows, unless he has, because of the size and the speeds and whatnot. So we hope it happens.
Ryan, about, the Slovis years, right? Mario Williams is potentially, in a sense, kind of what Michael Pittman brought to that offense. They're obviously not built the same, very different. But in terms of Pittman had more of that home run ability. And then you throw in, obviously, what Drake London brought to the table in terms of the physicality. And I think Ford feels a little bit like that long way to go to be Drake London, but of that ilk. I think Addison brings that hybrid between Amon-Ra St. Brown and Tyler Vaughn's, right? That intermediate piece. And I think you still sort of need that piece. We don't really know what Rice is yet. And Taj Washington, I think, is going to get lost in the fold. And we don't know what these other guys are quite yet. Addison would just be, I think, a home run in that offense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree. And it'd be another great recruit who USC, is getting more recruits. They just got another recruit, a defensive transfer, I believe I saw just a few hours ago come in. I can't even remember the name, but they got a big defensive back transfer, which is obviously they need. That's the side of the ball they need the most. Addison.
I think Addison coming to SC puts SC as the conference favorite. I think they could outscore their way to win the conference title.
Yeah.
I don't think that defensively that there's going to be sort of considered elite if they get potentially a CFP bid. I think there's a level difference still because of just they have to go a ways defensively. But I think they could outscore their way to a Pac-12 title, a possible Rose Bowl berth, and potentially even a fringe playoff case with Jordan Addison.
I agree 100%. 100%. So I would assume, so you said he's visited Texas. He's going to visit SC most likely this weekend. I would assume by next week we might have a decision, and hopefully we're seeing Lincoln Riley give up the fight on signal on Twitter, meaning we got some big news. USC has been tweeting that out over the last 3-4 days, and that we've seen some big news, but as soon as Lincoln Riley tweets it out, we know it's big news, and hopefully Addison comes here. But let's now transition, Jamal, to you brought this to my attention, so I'm going to let you lead it off, but essentially a piece of legislation potentially by California concerning not even NIL, but just concerning college athletics in general in the state of California. So I'll just let you explain it, and then we can debate a little bit, and then we'll end with little Rams and Chargers banter.
Yeah, Ryan, I think that this is a very significant day and week and weeks to come here when you talk about the landscape of California collegiate sports. With this new California bill on the table, Bill 1401, that's essentially proposing that football players, men's basketball players, and women's basketball players get a 50% revenue share of all revenue accrued by athletic departments. And this would be a landmark case moving forward and really put the California schools a la USC, UCLA, Stanford, and Cal in a position of tremendous advantage when you talk about compensation for players. And this is something that would be on top of nil. And so if you sort of project out what USC athletics made over the course of last year and on an average year, you're potentially looking at a football player making $200,000 a year. And if they have a 4-year career, they have $800,000 that they've made while they're at USC. And so it's a staggering amount of money. And I think the pros to this is obviously the players that have a seat at the table that have contributed so much to merchandise, to TV deals, to concessions, to just sort of general brand awareness, now finally are getting real seats at the table and real skin in the game in terms of an equity position in these processes and getting compensated for that. The cons are that from an athletic department perspective, these are the 3 primary revenue generating sports. No other sport in collegiate athletics really makes any money. And so the money that you're making off of these sports, you're helping fund the volleyballs and the soccers and the lacrosses and the hockeys and the track and fields and so on and so forth. And now that money potentially goes away from those sports and into the players' hands. And so our athletic department's now going to go from 15, 20, 25 sports down to 4 or 5 sports. So I think there's a lot here to dissect, but it's potentially a really landmark set of weeks coming up for California sports. And it's just a California-only bill. And when you overlay that with NIL and the size of the LA market and the San Francisco market and the endorsement opportunities, you're talking about these schools potentially leaping just about the entire competition in the landscape of collegiate athletics.
Before we get to I really want to hear your personal opinion if you're willing to give it, because I'll give mine on it. But before we get into that, why do you think California did this? I mean, this could have been something that they've been working on for a long time before NIL ever came about. And then now it finally kind of hit the floor. I'm not going to pretend I know how Senate floors and Congress floors really work and how long it takes to write bills. But to me, it just seems odd at this time to do this when we have NIL. Like, players can now make money. It doesn't affect the departments, doesn't affect the other sports. Like, if you're someone that is a revenue generating athlete, you can make money on it, but it's not going to affect the women's soccer team or the men's water polo team or anything like that, or men's volleyball, who we just saw Long Beach State UCLA final, like our 2 alma maters going at it, but no one else knows about volleyball. Even baseball is not a revenue generator. So it seems odd to me that this comes about now. Why do you think California legislation is even pushing this, just in your opinion?
Ryan, I think it's a great question. And just my personal opinion, I think California politics has always been about fixing systemic inequities. And if you look at even the title of the bill, the word equity is in the title of the bill. And so I think they're coming at it from the perspective of there is a system in place where university departments are making a significant amount of money off of the performance of certain players. So how do we make that process more equitable and actually put money in the hands of those players that are contributing so much to the university's bottom line? That's just sort of my personal take on why I think this is moving forward. And then when you sort of overlay it in the political landscape, I think nil is that perfect opportunity, that perfect stimulus to say, hey, this landscape is changing. So let's put this legislation now. It's almost the perfect time. And let's see if we can pass it. And, it puts politicians that are passing it in these sort of great positions for electability moving forward. And, then it becomes kind of more of a political game.
Yeah, of course, like with everything, unfortunately. But so what is your opinion on it? Do you think it's a good strategic move? Do you think it will benefit the overall players and athletic department? If you want, I can answer first, but just curious your actual thoughts. I mean, we can go back and forth on this because it's an interesting topic.
I would have loved this if we didn't have nil. But the fact that we have nil, there's a part of me that completely understands this and gets it. But there's a part of me that's also very sad because where we're headed for is these big sports. I think the future of college football and college basketball in particular will never be the same again. And I think that these universities, I think there's going to be such a concentration of talent where the top 95% of the talent is now going to be at 5% of the schools. B, I think these athletic departments are going to feel more like the NBA G League and baseball minor leagues than they are going to feel like the collegiate experience. And C, taking away the non-revenue generating elements and the non-revenue generating sports also takes away from that college experience and the school spirit and the overall vibe. And, for me personally, Ryan, I have had the great fortune of going to both USC and UCLA, USC undergrad and UCLA grad school. I went to USC during the Pete Carroll, Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush days, really the peak of the last 35 years of USC football. It was such a special time on campus. And one of the reasons why my classmates and friends of so many years are such fans of USC football or UCLA football is because there's a fundamental relatability that you have with the players where it's like, oh, you stepped on the same campus, grounds that I did. You were in the same buildings. We even shared a class or two. We had these similar experiences. We went to similar parties. We ate at the similar cafeterias. We went to the similar dorms. And I think what these things are doing now, like nil and like a piece of legislation like this, is it's moving that relatability gap further and further away between the non-student athlete and the student athlete. And I understand the student athlete deserves to get their bag, but I really wonder, and it worries me about the future of fandom of college sports, because one of the reasons why there's such passion and pageantry in college football in particular is because everybody has an alma mater and you live through those past experiences. And if the players that are now donning your beloved school colors, your beloved school mascot, have a fundamentally different experience than you had at that university, how much can you really relate to them? And how much are they really kind of your guys? And how much is it your team anymore? And that's what I worry about.
Yeah, no, that's a good, all good points as always, Jamal. It's hard because, like you said in the beginning, I understand fundamentally where the thought process is. I'm not going to pretend to know how politics and bills and what are drafted up. Like we said, I don't know exactly when this process began of drafting it up. But I will just say we are where we are right now, right? You are where your feet are standing currently. And I think we're standing in a place with NIL we're in a good spot. Like, I don't see the purpose of having this come in when we have NIL and you potentially disrupt other sports for no reason. And like you alluded to, you are not only basically elevating the three sports: football, men's basketball, or women's basketball, but then you're devaluing your other sports. And as a comparison, and this is a very different comparison. I don't want anyone to hear me wrong here, because I think overall, I want to talk about Title IX. Title IX overall did a lot of very good things for college athletics, but you look at something like Title IX that then elevated other sports, de-elevated others. I think specifically, I went to Long Beach State. The football program was cut because of a sanction like Title IX in a sense. And again, overall did well, but now we're talking about something that's not elevating women's athletics. You're just elevating profitability for certain sports, and you're going to devalue other sports. That is what college is about, what the college experience is about, and quite frankly, what a lot of athletes go to college for. I mean, a lot of these college athletes, depending what department you're in, may not ever go to college if not for the scholarships they received for the specific sport they're in. And if all of a sudden water polo is cut across the board, I mean, that's what California colleges, the big West where I went to school, is known for great water polo. But guess what? There's zero revenue that comes in from water polo. No one watches water polo live in person, and no one watches on television unless you're watching the Olympics. So that's kind of the underarching consequence, negative consequence, if you will, from it. And then even just on the immediate surface level, you look at the programs of, so we're talking just California, not the Pac-12. You look at programs like San Diego State, Fresno State. I mean, how much do those football programs and those basketball programs really bring in? Because everyone will talk about USC, and I mean, when you talk about California, that's really it, because UCLA doesn't bring a lot in football wise. They do men's basketball wise. Cal doesn't bring a lot in football wise. So it's kind of, even when you look at that, it's interesting, because like, how much do those programs really bring in that's profitable? I mean, me and you've talked about it on the Brew and Bible podcast a lot, how UCLA is such an interesting conversation athletically anyway, because the football program doesn't bring in as much as like SEC schools or USC and whatnot. So I just think there's more harm that can come from a bill like this passing, especially when we have NIL already in place. There's opportunity for people in a capitalist society to now make money based on what they're doing on the football field, or based on their image, their likeness, all that above. And you don't take away from anyone else, which in my opinion, again, I haven't read the bill yet. I just know from what you've told me and what I've been hearing over the last, 7 to 8 hours. But to me, you're taking away to give other people what you have felt has been a negative over the past 50, 60 years in college athletics, but you're harming the future of college athletics, where we kind of reprimanded that in a way with NIL. So I don't know. It's a slippery slope.
In terms of what you said, and I'll just sort of close on this point here quickly, that I think, to me, NIL is that enabler for those sports programs that have the ability to give more to their players to be able to do so, and it's a supply and demand issue. But for those other sports that don't have that ability, you can't. NIL is the enabler to help the sports that have the potential to reach their zenith. But the sports that can't reach that zenith, you can't cut them and cripple them either. And I think the great point that you brought up about the San Diego States and the Fresno States and Cal and Stanford, but what about something like UCLA gymnastics, Ryan, that has been such an incredible sport and such a social movement in our society? What about something like USC track and field? You know who the commencement speaker at USC's graduation was this past weekend? Was Allison Felix, the most decorated female track and field athlete of all time. If USC track and field is not what it can be, does Allison Felix be the USC commencement speaker? Probably not. And so we really have to be mindful about the unintended consequences of something like this, especially if NIL is there. If NIL isn't there, I completely understand the thinking even more. But with NIL there, this feels a little bit reckless and dangerous.
Well, and to what we were just talking about, if a player like Jordan Addison can potentially make $3 million, why give him an extra $200K just because it's the percentage of what the athletic department make? Like, what are we doing here? Like, now we're splitting hairs. And kind of the last thing I'll just say on a personal experience, going to Long Beach State obviously is not the collegiate athletic powerhouse like those of USC and UCLA. But even still, the athletes at Long Beach State, who I had a lot of friends, at Long Beach State, I had a lot of friends who were, great athletes, great people. So I'm not saying anything bad, but the opportunities they were given and the extra benefits, if you will. I will say that nothing illegal to my knowledge, but the extra benefits they got by being a collegiate athlete far outweighed being someone like me, who was just a paying student going to the same school. So I think that too, it's like, all right, how much more are we trying to compensate for past wrongdoings to what currently is actually being offered? So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where it goes, but I'll just be blunt. I'm against it.
Agreed.
You can't tell.
I'm right there with you, Ryan. I'm right there with you.
So we will we'll keep everyone posted on that where it goes. You said that LA Times just came out with an article on that today, correct? So it's pretty fresh, I think.
And Thursday is kind of a big day in terms of the bill moving forward. So everyone keep an eye out on that.
There we go. So we will keep you posted here on the LA Football Network, the LA Football Show, on where that goes. But let's transition now to the NFL, Jamal, to wrap up the show. Rams, Chargers. I think there's such a beautiful opportunity for a rivalry here, and a good rivalry, not a malice rivalry or a degrading rivalry or anything like that, but just a true, passionate inner city rivalry like that of USC and UCLA. And so I think we want to kind of discuss how that actually happens. And we don't just have the backhanded memes or the silly big brother, little brother, which will always be to some extent there. But how has this actually become a true rivalry? So I'll kind of toss to you and let you give your opening statement, and then I will either counter, rebuttal, or just agree with you.
I think, Ryan, we're at such an interesting point in LA sports where we have two of everything. And yet, if you really sort of look at it, we sort of have half a rivalry, right? Like, I mean, if you think about Dodgers, Angels, not really. Lakers, Clippers, absolutely not. When you think about, even Rams,
Kings, Ducks,
in the past, it just didn't really exist. You look at USC, UCLA basketball, that's not really a rivalry. It's really just kind of USC, UCLA football to a certain extent that is the rivalry. And so I think that there's just such a unique opportunity with Rams Chargers. And I think it starts with a couple of ingredients. I think you have to have fan bases that are equally passionate and equal in number. And I think that's something to sort of set the stage. I think the second ingredient is you can't have one team jump out too far ahead in terms of success before the other team has an opportunity to catch up. A la USC football, a la UCLA basketball, a la Lakers basketball. And so I think we're in a situation where the Rams won a Super Bowl, but it almost feels like it's sort of 1-0, right? And then I think the third piece to make this really a great rivalry is they have to play memorable games in the regular season and hopefully meet in the Super Bowl at some point. And those games need to be highly contested, highly memorable, and they need to be testy. And I think those are kind of the three ingredients to really make this the rivalry that I believe it can be in a very unique way.
Yeah. I would say, Jamal, outside of USC and UCLA football, probably the biggest LA rivalry is LAFC, LA Galaxy.
Right.
Soccer world.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Like, that's probably the biggest because even Kings, Ducks, they're in the same division, and I would say they're not that strong of a rival. I mean, there's diehard hockey fans would definitely not like Ducks fans and Kings fans, but it's definitely not publicly known within LA, I would say. And so there's a real opportunity for that. And I think piggyback on everything you said, because I agree with everything you said, so I'm not going to rehash and go down that. But I think the other 2 points, or a few points that I'll say, is one, you need a major face for each team, which we have in Matthew Stafford and we have in Justin Herbert. So you have two iconic quarterbacks now franchising both your teams. And the fact that we can have debates and fun of who's the better quarterback and who has the brighter future and who's an MVP race, that alone, I think it sparks a fun debate. Because let's be honest, when we look at, let's just look at Lakers Clippers. It was always Kobe. It was always Shaq. There was no one on the Clippers. I mean, we had those few years with Blake Griffin and even before that, we had the Corey Maggette and the Elton Brand years
and Darius Miles.
But but there was never a true like a la superstar versus superstar. We have that with the Rams and Chargers.
Yes.
Justin Herbert is a superstar. Matthew Stafford is a superstar. Derwin James is a superstar. Jalen Ramsey is a superstar. You have it on both sides of the ball. So we have the superstar power for both teams. Two, and it's kind of piggybacking off the winning you said, but it's being a winning franchise. Like you can't have the Rams win a Super Bowl and the Chargers be a 4-win team every year. I know the Chargers didn't win the Super Bowl or didn't go to the playoffs last year, but they still had a winning record, a 9-win team. They're poised for the playoffs. They probably had the best offseason of any team in the NFL. And then the Rams coming off a Super Bowl win, still had a very good offseason, returned a lot of players, all that firepower. So you have kind of that conversation going. And then 3, it's about social and community, right? And the Chargers have the best social media team in not just football and sports. So they've knocked out of the park with their social media team. They're very involved in what they do in the community with kids. The Rams are one of the best organizations around in what they do in the community, whether it be with schools, whether it be with nonprofits, whether it be with, Andrew Whitworth winning the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. So you have all these factors now with star power, with the winning ability, and then with your community outreach and community attractiveness. And now, like you said, to wrap it all up, it's that head-to-head clash that I wish the NFL, and there's no way to really do this, but I wish they could make a exception that every year, like inner city teams could play. Like the Giants and Jets could play every year. The Rams and Chargers could play every year, because that's also how you foster, right? If you never play, it's kind of hard to really have that rivalry. Whereas in basketball, you have 82 games, baseball, you have 162 games, hockey, you have 82 games. They're always going to play at least once or twice a year. Football, you might go 3 years. We never play. So that, I think, too, kind of fosters that rivalry. But I think really just comes down to, if we're just putting it on one point, it's who's winning. That's really what it comes down to.
No doubt. And Ryan, the one thing I'll say is the superstar point that you made was so spot on. Because even if you look at, let's take the SC UCLA football rivalry, for instance. The 3 most iconic moments in that rivalry, kind of seminal moments that sort of defined an era, was 67, when it was OJ against Gary Beban. They were fighting for the Heisman, the Rose Bowl national championship. 88, when it was Rodney Peete against Troy Aikman, Rose Bowl, Heisman, all on the line. And then 2005, when it was Reggie Bush against Maurice Jones-Drew, and it was 1 versus 6. Again, Heisman, Pac-12, and national championship all on the line. And when you look at, kind of the Lakers-Clippers, think about back in the bubble. The one time we kind of had it almost with Lakers and Clippers was when it was LeBron and AD, and then Kawhi and Paul George. And it was your Denver Nuggets that came back from 3-1 down to destroy the Clippers, that denied a Laker-Clipper Western Conference Finals. That could have really solidified a Laker-Clipper rivalry for a few years if that happened, and we fell short of it. So the superstar piece is just so critical, of having superstars of equal ilk and status and performance on both sides. Yeah,
the Nuggets, I think, single-handedly hurt the Clippers rep in Los Angeles for sure, at least for the foreseeable future. But yeah, there's so much potential with these two teams, and for a Chargers team, I'm not trying to lean Chargers, but I think the Rams have proven themselves, right? They won a Super Bowl, so I don't think I need to build them up. But for a Chargers team that has what they've done just since Brandon Staley was hired, not even mention that. I mentioned the Super Bowl power, but you have the coaches. You have Sean McVay and Brandon Staley are 2 coaches that not only are great coaches, not only are great human beings, men of integrity, great leaders, but they're great with the media. They're great with fans. They go on shows. We've seen both of them on Pat McAfee's show. How often have you seen Mike McCarthy from the Cowboys on a Pat McAfee show, or being oh, the fans love Mike McCarthy or whatnot. The fans love both their coaches. And so I think when we see the fan base with the Chargers, I don't even want to say grow, because I think it's there, but I think as we see them become more resilient in their not just understanding of what it takes to truly back their team for a full 17-game season, but just fully integrate within the culture of LA as well, as I think Rams fans, because there's the history of the Rams being here and the Chargers are just more new, then that too will just become more and more prevalent. And as we see, I mean, let's be honest, as we see a lot of the older generation of Niners and Raiders fans, that there's not a new upbringing really of those teams' fan bases now, because we have Chargers and Rams that have been here now for 5 and 6 years. And so we're going to see that youth continue to elevate and go up and up. So I think there's, it's a very exciting time. I think the rivalry is very young right now. And Jamal, I don't know if you noticed this. I feel like right now, Chargers fans are kind of like, yeah, the Rams, yeah, whatever. We don't really care. Like, yeah, we own LA. We don't care. Rams fans are like, oh, little brother renting our stadium. Like, get out of here. Go back to San Diego. That's kind of the mantra. But I think as years go on, if both teams continue to have success, it'll become a true, like, all right, Chargers are in LA. They're here to stay. Rams are LA. Chargers fans want to take LA. Now let's really let's just rile this thing up. We have the star power. We have the coaches. We have the stadium. We have LAFB Network covering it. Let's rock and roll.
Well, Ryan, the last interesting piece here is, I think you went to it, and it's a magical one, is the coaches. I mean, think about, the fact that same coaching tree, Staley is actually off of the McVay branch. I mean, can you imagine 10 years from now, there's a 30 for 30, the way there was with the two Bills, right? With Belichick and Parcells, and how the coaches generated that rivalry. Can you imagine if there's a McVay-Staley type of dynamic where these guys start running into each other in the Super Bowl over a couple of years and deny the other, greater success, greater titles, greater hardware, greater legacy, and this thing becomes kind of a 30 for 30? How cool would that be for LA?
That Week 17 matchup, Jamal, Chargers-Rams, I am so excited for, not just because we're the LA Football Network and we cover it, but everything you just said with the coaches, because they since Staley went to the Chargers, they played in preseason last week, week 1. It's a preseason game. Who cares? It's like you pat each other on the back, you're in the stadium together. But seeing them in a Week 17 game, which will have huge playoff implications, divisional implications, because both these teams are playoff teams. I've said it all along. I'll say it again. Both these teams are going to the playoffs. It's such a big game for LA, for both these teams, for these fan bases, and for this rivalry that we've been talking about to truly take off. And I think we'll know, Jamal, we can really get a breadth of that rivalry the week leading up to that game. Because my hope is that going in, so what is that, Week 17? So each team will have played 16 games. My hope is each team is in that 10, 11 win range at that point, 9 minimum. And going into it, it's the talk of the town. Like, oh man, who's like really taken over as the supreme in this town for this week? It's just for the week. The Rams are the supreme. They won the Super Bowl. I'm not saying that for Rams fans. Don't freak out. But for that week, and then we can really build up to that, have the game, hopefully see fireworks between Herbert and Stafford. And then after that, I think we'll go back to this conversation and say, have we established a rivalry? Or are we still a few years off?
And Ryan, the one thing I'll close with here is, and I don't have a horse in the race at LAFB. We love both the teams. They're both like our children. But I think it would mean more to the rivalry if the Chargers beat the Rams in that Week 17 game, considering the dynamics that you said about kind of the incumbent LA team versus the team that's moved to LA, the champion versus the challenger. I'm reminded by something Derek Fisher said about 15, 20 years ago between the Lakers and the Clippers, because it's a very similar dynamic, right? When they still have shared Staple and now Crypto.com Arena. And Derek Fisher said, we thought of ourselves as the owners and the Clippers were the tenants. And I think there's a similar feeling where the Rams are the owners of SoFi and the Chargers are just the tenants. And I think the tenants need to beat the owners to really get things cooking. And I think for the rivalry, I think the Chargers need to win that game more than the Rams do.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what needs to happen. And it's what needs to happen for them to get more respect, I think, in the city too, because they could literally be a 12-win team, go on and go to the AFC Championship, but unless they beat the Rams, they'll always be second fiddle for now in the city to the Rams. And so that's where that head-to-head comes. And the rivalry will be there regardless, I think, because of the superstar power we talked about, because if you're able to go to the AFC Championship, go to the Super Bowl, there'll be that, okay, well, they're a good team. We'll give them that credit, but they haven't beat us. So until you're able to beat the Rams or the Rams beat the Chargers, that's kind of where that true rivalry, when it happens so little in the fact you can play being in different conferences. So I'm excited. I'm fired up. It's going to be fun. I mean, we're excited to obviously cover the teams all year long, but that the rivalry, and I think what's fun for us, Jamal, is we can kind of not doctor, but we can facilitate the rivalry in a sense that, hey, let's be rivals, but we're also LA. Let's drink together, have fun together. We can watch games together, and we can have our Chargers over here, Rams over here. We can clash heads, do trivia, do fun, but it's a fun rivalry where it's like we still like share the same schools, we share the same restaurants. That's what makes a inner city rivalry so beautiful.
Absolutely, Ryan. It's like we said, and I think this is merchandise that will be coming later in the season. Our city, our network, our rivalry.
Yes, there it is. There it is. We'll just use the same one and just change the slogan at the end. So, oh man, well, hey, this is a great show, Jamal. I think with that we're good to sign off here. Any last thoughts for the people before you are? I won't say where you're going or anything because I want people to follow you. Though I want to, but Jamal will be going to his honeymoon, much deserved, delayed by COVID. So he will be gone for a little bit. So super pumped for you. Congrats on that. But any final thoughts before you have a little hiatus here?
No, this has just been such a great episode, Ryan. I'm excited with the wife. It's kind of been 2 years in the making to go on our honeymoon to Europe for a few weeks, but excited to be back in early June and back on the pod and talking all these great things. What a unique time. And look at all the unique things we talked about. On the field stuff, legislation, rivalry, just such a beautiful time in LA football and so thrilled to be part of it here with you, kind of curating the stories and the beautiful narratives that come.
Yeah, just plenty more to come, and excited that you're on this journey with me, and we can continue just really elevating and exposing, if you will, LA football in the great city of Angels. So you and your wife, I hope you have an amazing trip. I do not want to hear from you, even though we're going to talk after I hit the record button, but I don't want to hear from you from now until you get back from your honeymoon. Thank you all for tuning in. This is the LA Football Show. Again, you can find us anywhere you get your podcast, also on YouTube at LAFB Network, and of course on the website, as you should all go to right now, because everything you need for LA football is right there, LAFBnetwork.com. I'm Ryan Dyrud at Ryan Dyrud LAFB on Twitter. That's Jamal Madni at LAFB Jams on Twitter. This is the LA Football Show. Jamal, thank you. Have a good night.